I used to think traditions were what held a family together. Birthdays, Sunday roasts, Eid gatherings, even the silence after someone said something wrong. But no one dared to call it out. Those were our family rituals, the glue that kept us pretending, like everything was fine. But now, when I hear the word tradition, my stomach tightens. My chest hurts, because one of our traditions just one-ratted our family from the inside out. It started with a chair. Not just any chair, the one. At the head of the table, every Friday, like clockwork, the family would gather at Dada's house for dinner. No matter what was happening in our lives, exams, weddings, hospital visits, even funerals, the Friday dinner was sacred. Couldn't skip it unless you wanted to be treated like an outcast. That was the first unspoken rule. And Dada, always sat at the head of the table. It was this huge antique wooden chair. Carved arms, straight back, heavy as hell. Nobody else was allowed to touch it ever. It was his throne. And we, his loyal, weary subjects. I remember being a little girl and watching him sit there commanding the room without saying much. Everyone deferred to him. My dad, my uncles, even Amy. And the food wouldn't be served until he picked up the first piece of naan, tore it, and dipped it into the saline. That moment would be like a bell, signaling the start of the meal. At the time, it felt ... grand, like I belonged to something ancient and important. But I was too young to notice how rigid the air was, how everyone smiled too hard and never asked questions. And I definitely didn't notice how my mother would stiffen every time Dada cleared his throat. The tradition was simple. Dada sat at the head. He made the rules, he approved the decisions, gave the final word on everything from job offers to marriage proposals. And no one challenged him. Not even a boo. I still remember the Friday my cousin Zara brought her fiancé to dinner. His name was Imran. He was kind, soft-spoken, with these nervous eyes that kept darting to the floor every time Dada spoke. I liked him, but Dada didn't. The moment he heard that Imran's parents were divorced, his face darkened. "What kind of family is that?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Zara's face fell. Her hands trembled in her lap. She tried to defend him, to explain that Imran's mother had left an abusive marriage and raised him alone, with dignity. But Dada wasn't having it. "He's broken stock," he said. "A man who comes from a broken home is already shattered inside. He'll never be whole." And that was it. Tradition dictated that Dada's word was final. The engagement was called off a week later. Zara stopped showing up to Friday dinners altogether. Her mother kept coming, though, pretending everything was fine, while her daughter slipped quietly into depression. We were taught not to speak of these things. Pain wasn't something you confronted. It was something you swallowed, like overcooked rice or bitter medicine. As long as you showed up to dinner, wore your smile like armor, and let Dada sit in his damn chair, everything was considered normal. But it wasn't. And I think, deep down, we all knew it. The thing about traditions is, they evolve, or they become prisons. Ours was the latter, and I guess I always thought someone would break the cycle. Be my older brother Usman. He was bold, reckless even. Once, he dared to argue with Dada about studying abroad. He wanted to go to Canada for university. Dada refused. "What's in Canada that you can't get here? It's just an excuse to become one of those westernized boys who forget their roots." Usman went anyway. But when he came back for Eid 6 years later with a foreign degree and a white girlfriend named Hannah, it was like throwing a match into a room soaked in gasoline. Dada didn't say a word during dinner that day. He just stared at Hannah with those cold, unforgiving eyes. The rest of the family avoided eye contact. My mother served the biryani in silence. When dinner ended, Dada stood up, walked to the living room, and turned on the news. That was his way of announcing someone was dead to him by acting as if they never existed. Usman stopped coming to family dinners after that. I asked him once on a random phone call 2 years later if he missed us. He said he missed me. And that sometimes, when he made dal chawal on a Sunday afternoon, he'd cry a little. But no, he didn't miss the dinners. That place never felt like home, he said. It felt like a performance. Still, I kept going. I was the obedient one, the good daughter. I played my role well, until I couldn't. My breaking point came the night of Dada's 80th birthday. It was a big deal, gold-embroidered tablecloths, 3-layered cake, relatives flying in from Islamabad and Sharjah. Ami had been planning it for months. Dada sat at the head of the table like always, surrounded by smiling faces that didn't dare blink without his approval. After dinner, we all took turns giving speeches. My dad praised his father's wisdom. My uncles praised his strength. Even my mother, whose back still ached from years of his condescension, said he had been the pillar of this family. And then it was my turn. I hadn't planned to speak. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was the way my cousin Rahim was forced to change out of his jeans because Dada thought they were un-Islamic. Maybe it was the look on my sister Mariam's face when she was told to lower her eyes in front of the men. Or maybe it was just the weight of all the years I'd stayed silent. I stood up. My heart was pounding in my ears. I want to say something, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. Dada raised one eyebrow. I took a deep breath. I love this family. But I don't love what we've become. And I don't love how one chair at the head of a table can control so many lives. The silence that followed was violent. I've watched cousins get shunned. I've watched women get silenced. I've seen people abandon their dreams, their partners, their selves. It's just to keep a tradition going that doesn't serve anyone but your ego, I said. Looking straight at Dad, someone dropped a fork. My aunt gasped. My mother's face went white, but I kept going. I don't want to raise my future kids in a family where they have to ask permission to be who they are. I don't want a tradition that demands obedience but never offers understanding. My voice cracked, but I didn't cry. And I don't care if that means I don't get invited to Friday dinners anymore. I'd rather eat alone than stay silent. In a room that punishes honesty, I sat down. The chair beneath me felt like fire. My hands were shaking. Dada didn't say a word. He stood up as he always did when he wanted to end something and walked to the living room. The news came on. The same channel. The same anchors, but something had changed. I left before dessert. That was the last Friday dinner I ever attended, and I wish I could say the story ended there, that my truth opened doors, started healing broke chains. But that's not what happened. What happened was... Well, that's the part no one wants to hear. After I left that night, I sat in my car outside Dada's house for almost 20 minutes. Hands clenched around the steering wheel. Engine humming softly like it didn't know what to do with me either. I didn't cry. I expected to. The tears to come gushing out the way they always do after big fights, hot and fast, as if they've been waiting their whole lives to escape. But I didn't cry. I just sat there, still in my formal clothes, the faint scent of biryani clinging to my dupatta, and stared at the massive wooden gate that had always felt more like a border than a welcome. I didn't get any calls that night. Not from Ami, not from Abu, not even from Mariam, who used to crawl into my bed as a little girl and tell me secrets in the dark. I checked my phone a dozen times. Nothing. By morning, the silence had settled into my bones, and for weeks, it stayed that way at first. I convinced myself they just needed time. Maybe they were shocked. Maybe my words hit harder than I realized. Maybe some hopeful, naive part of me believed they were finally thinking about the weight of that chair and everything it represented. But no. What came instead? Was exile not loud, messy, dramatic exile? Not door-slamming, screaming exile? Just ... quiet? Amy stopped sending me her late-night care, say Pahanch Gay, messages after work. Abu didn't forward me his usual articles about digital, banking trends, or how to succeed by waking up at 5 a.m. Mariam muted our WhatsApp chat, and my messages turned into those cold, gray double ticks read, but ignored. At first, I tried to reach out. I texted Amy on a Tuesday I miss. You know, reply. I called Mariam on a Sunday morning. She picked up and said, I'm busy. And hung up before I could ask with what. And then I just ... stopped. I stopped trying because it's a special kind of heartbreak, realizing your family sees your honesty as betrayal. That speaking your truth is treated like a sin, and compliance, not love, is the currency of affection. But the worst part, the part that still wakes me up at 3 a.m. some nights, I started to doubt myself. I'd stand in front of the mirror while brushing my teeth and suddenly hear Dada's voice echoing in my head. Too much pride ruins a woman, or Amy's quiet warning. Years ago, when I wore jeans to a cousin's wedding, Chup Karbeta Ziada bot Cardi Hotolog bot Banit Hain. And I'd wonder, maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I just stayed quiet, smiled politely, played my role like everyone else, ... But then I'd remember. Zara, her engagement torn apart like tissue paper because of her grandfather's arrogance. I'd remember Usman's thousands of miles away, watching reruns of Pakistani dramas, just to feel a little less alone. I'd remember the look on Mariam's face when she got her university admission letter and Dada tore it up, saying Lahore is too far. Girls don't go that far to study. I'd remember myself sitting at that damn table every Friday, swallowing truth so hard my chest would ache by morning. So no, I wasn't wrong. I was just done. But being done doesn't mean you stop. Feeling it just means you carry everything alone. 2 months passed, and 3. Then the calls started coming, but not from my family. From relatives. AUNTIEs with sharp tongues and sharper memories. Beta. Tumni, wo. Rot ko, thoda ziada, bold. Bal diatha, na. Tum herdada ji nito itna, sabkuch kia tum sabkia lai. Thoda respect toban tahai. Akala, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words to me in years, called to say, he's getting old. Don't break his heart in his final years. There it was again. The guilt, like a fog that crawled into my lungs, made it hard to breathe. It wasn't even about whether I was right or wrong anymore. It was about daring to disrupt the tradition that made everyone feel like they were good people. That's the thing about these rituals, these legacy-less performances. They don't just protect the person at the top. They protect everyone complicit. If you question the system, you're not just attacking Dada. You're accusing everyone else of being cowards, and no one wants to see themselves that way. Then came the heart. Attack, Mariam called. First time in nearly 4 months. Her voice was tight, clipped, no greetings, no warmth. Dad is in the hospital. You should come before it's too late. I sat down slowly, the room spinning just a little. Is he conscious? I asked. No. I see you, doctors said it was mild, but ... you never know. And then a beat of silence. He asked for you. It felt like a punch in the stomach me. Why? Why would the man who couldn't even look at me after that dinner want to see me now? I drove to the hospital like I was floating half in reality, half in the fog of a dream I wasn't sure I wanted to wake up from. When I reached the ICU waiting area, everyone was already there. AMMI.AB, my chachas, my fupos, even Zara, standing awkwardly in the corner like a ghost who had wandered into the wrong movie set. No one greeted me. They just... noticed me. Like a bad smell, a crack in the wall. I walked in anyway. When I reached Dada's bedside, something inside me twisted. He looked small, shrunken, like all the power that once filled that rigid spine and booming voice had been drained. Out, leaving behind a fragile old man tethered to machines and memories. His eyes opened slowly, and then the most unexpected thing in the world happened. He smiled weakly, but it was a smile. I sat down beside him. I couldn't speak. He took a breath, labored, raspy. You always had your mother's fire, he whispered. I blinked, stunned. She wanted to speak once, he added. Long ago, about the way my mother treated her. She didn't. His eyes again, as if the memory was too heavy to carry. And now, you've said it. Silence. Then he opened his eyes again, looked right at me. I didn't agree with you. Still don't. But you broke the curse. Tears filled my eyes so fast, I didn't even notice they had spilled until I tasted salt on my lips. It wasn't. An apology? Not quite. But it was more than I ever expected. He held my hand for a moment, then let go. He didn't die that night. In fact, he made a slow recovery. But something in him changed. He stopped attending the Friday dinners. Said he was too tired. So they moved the chair. No one dared to sit in it, though. Not at first. It remained empty, like a relic, haunted thing. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the family started. Shifting. Zara came back. Miriam got accepted into a university, broadened this time. Amy didn't stop her. Usman flew in for Eid. He brought Hannah. And nobody said a word. And me started breathing again. I still don't go to every dinner, but when I do, I sit where I want. I speak when I want. Ask questions. The tradition still exists, but it no longer owns us and the chair. Eventually, they sold it. Gave the money to charity. Funny, right? It's the very thing that represented control, silence, and pride. Ended up funding school books and winter blankets for children in Tharparkar. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. But even now, even after all this time, I wonder how many families are still kneeling at the altar of tradition, mistaking obedience for unity? How many people are still sitting at tables, hearts heavy with silence, thinking this is just the way things are? I wish I could tell them truth doesn't ruin families. Silence does. The thing they don't tell you about change is that it doesn't come cleanly. It's not like movies where there's one big speech, a few slow claps, and suddenly everyone understands each other. No. Change is jagged, uneven. It cuts you on the way out. Even after the chair was gone, I could still feel it. Its shadow stretched across our dinners, our conversations, our memories. It had been the sun we revolved around for decades. When it disappeared, none of us really knew how to orient ourselves. At first, people tiptoed around the emptiness, voiding the subject, pretending the chair had never existed at all. But its absence was loud. It made us notice things we'd learned not to see. The way Amy still paused before disagreeing with Abu, like she was calculating risk. The way Miriam flinched when a joke about her tone was made, her laughter delayed and uncertain. The way the women still served food before sitting, even when no one asked them to. It made me realize something I'd never wanted to admit. Tradition didn't need a chair to survive. It lived in us, in the pauses, the habits, the inherited guilt. And maybe that's what scared me most. I saw it most clearly one Friday when my cousin Santa brought her 9-year-old daughter, Alina, to dinner. Alina was wild in the best way. She wore sneakers, with her shalwar kameez, asked questions no one was ready for, and ate dessert before dinner just because she could. I loved her instantly. But that evening, after dinner, Lena sat on the floor sketching with a pencil while the adults talked. Someone asked a casual question, something about who she liked more, Mama or Baba. And without missing a beat, she said, "I like Mama more. Baba doesn't let Mama talk." The entire room froze. Santa's face went white. Her husband laughed too loudly. "She's just joking," he said. But Alina wasn't laughing. She was still drawing, and for a second, saw it again, that familiar shift, that quiet press of shame wrapping around a woman's voice, the way Santa avoided everyone's eyes, the way she smiled like her teeth hurt. It broke me, because that's how it begins, doesn't it? Not with a chair or a grandfather or a rule carved in stone. It begins with the unspoken, with little girls learning which truths are too heavy for a room, with women learning to apologize for their volume, with men learning that silence equals respect. And I realized we weren't free, not yet. We'd burned the throne, but we were still kneeling, so I did something reckless. I invited the women of our family, just the women, for tea one afternoon. It wasn't easy. My chachis thought it was odd. Fapos asked, "Is something wrong?" Amy, sweet, cautious Amy, asked 3 times if we should invite the men too, just to be fair. "No," I said. "Just us." The first few minutes were awkward. Everyone sat like they were waiting for someone to give instructions. Tea was poured. Biscuits were passed around. Then I stood up. "I want to ask something," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Do any of you ever feel ... unheard?" Silence. I saw the panic flicker across faces. the alarm of being asked to step outside the script, and then slowly, miraculously, and raised her hand. "I used to," she said. "When I was first married." The room exhaled, and then Santa spoke. Then Zara, even my eldest Fupo, the one who still wore her dupatta like armor, admitted she sometimes wished she'd worked before marriage. It was as if we'd all been carrying secrets in our marrow, waiting for permission to let them breathe. We talked for hours, not just about men or marriage, but about dreams, regrets, books we'd read in college and forgotten we loved, places we wanted to travel. It's things we never said out loud because we thought they didn't belong to us anymore. By the time we finished, something in the room had shifted. No revolution, no fireworks, just a quiet reclaiming. The next Friday dinner was different. Santa spoke without looking at her husband first. Zara wore jeans. Amy laughed for the first time in months. The sound was unfamiliar and glorious, and yet, even in these moments of light, darkness lingered at the edges. Not everyone was ready. My eldest Chacha stopped coming, said the dinners had become too Western. Another cousin's wife muttered something about bad influences under her breath when her daughter said she wanted to study architecture, and I started having dreams. Not nightmares exactly, just ... confusing ones. In one dream, I was sitting at the table again. In the chair was still there, except now it was empty, and everyone was looking at me like they wanted me to sit in it. I remember feeling sick. Like if I sat down, I'd become everything I hated. In another dream, I saw Alina sitting in that chair, older now, her wild spirit dimmed, wearing a heavy dupatta, speaking in a voice that wasn't hers. That one woke me up crying. Because that's the truth about cycles. They don't just break once. You have to keep breaking them, again and again and again. Sometimes I wonder what Dada thinks now. He's still alive, still quiet. He spends most of his time in the garden, watering the same plants over and over like he's trying to keep something alive that he can't name. We haven't spoken about that night since the hospital, but once. I caught him watching us from the veranda, just watching, while the rest of us sat at the table laughing, arguing, breathing freely, and for a moment saw something in his eyes. Not anger, not disappointment, but grief. Not for the loss of control, but for all the years wasted preserving it, maybe. He finally saw it, the cost. One evening, as the sun slipped into the horizon and the call to Maghreb echoed through the air, Amy and I sat on the terrace drinking chai. She was quiet for a long time, then turned to me and said, "You know, I used to hate the sound of that chair dragging across the floor. I looked at her every Friday," she said, "when Dada would sit down. That sound had made something inside me clench, like I had to shrink." I reached for her hand. She took it. "I wish I'd said something sooner," she whispered. Didn't say anything. I didn't need to. We just sat there watching the sky darken. Two women from two generations, finally breathing in the same rhythm, finally realizing that freedom doesn't arrive like a storm. It grows slowly, like healing, like forgiveness. Like a table where everyone has a seat hand. No one needs permission to speak. It's been almost 2 years since the chair was sold. 2 years since I stood in a room full of people who once taught me to shrink and told them I wouldn't do it anymore. 2 years since I made space for my voice and learned just how many others had been waiting to do the same. And somehow, despite all the fractures that followed, we're still here. The dinners still happen, though they look different now. Sometimes we eat outside on the patio, the kids running barefoot between us, music playing from someone's phone. There's laughter now, real laughter. The kind that bubbles up and spills over. Not the kind you force between clenched teeth. The women speak more. The men listen more. And when there's silence, it no longer feels like fear. It feels like rest. Sometimes, we catch Amy watching the younger girls, Alina, Ariba, nerd telling jokes, interrupting each other, dreaming out loud with no sense of shame. And there's this look on her face, can't quite describe. It's not envy. It's not regret. It's something softer, sadder, braver. A kind of peace she never thought she'd get to witness. She had told me once, while cutting onions in the kitchen, that her mother used to keep her awake at night reciting good girl rules. How to sit, how to speak, how to disappear politely. We didn't call it tradition, she said. We just called it survival. That stuck with me, because I think for a lot of women, maybe even some men, tradition is just survival dressed in gold. It's silence covered in rose petals. We inherit it without knowing we can choose not to pass it on. And the most dangerous thing? It convinces you that love is earned by submission. But love, real love, it survives truth. It bends with you. It learns. Not everyone gets that, though some of the family still keeps their distance. One of my uncles refuses to come to dinners if that girl, meaning Ms. there, says I poison the family. That ever since I opened my mouth, nothing's been the same. And he's right. Nothing is. But isn't that the point? Miriam now sends me selfies from her university dorm. Sometimes she's wearing a hoodie, sometimes a hijab. She says she's learning to be both fierce and soft. That she's unlearning shame. Zara's getting married next month to someone. She chose, he's kind. He listens. He laughs with his whole face. And when I asked Dada if he'd be attending, he nodded and said, if she's happy, what else matters? I almost cried right there in the hallway. As for Dada, his health comes and goes like tidewater. Some weeks he's alert, sharp, present. Other times he drifts, confused by dates and faces. But there's one thing he never forgets: names. He remembers every grandchild, every great-grandchild. He says each name like it's a prayer. One afternoon, I sat with him in the garden. He was watching the lemon tree sway in the wind, a shawl wrapped around his shoulders. You know, he said, without turning his head, that chair was given to me by my father. He used to sit in it before me. I nodded. He told me it was a symbol of honor, of control, of responsibility. He paused. But he never warned me that it could become a cage. That silence that followed felt sacred, like something heavy had finally landed. I wish I'd sat beside you, he whispered, even once. I reached out, gently placed my hand over his. You still can, I said. He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes weren't clouded that day. They were sharp, wet with memory. Maybe the tradition wasn't the chair, I said. Maybe it was the silence around it. He smiled, small sad. I hope they forgive me, he said. I think they already have, I replied, and I meant it. Because healing doesn't always come with fireworks or fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in moments like that, quiet, ordinary. It's almost forgettable, but unforgettable. A few weeks ago, we held the first open dinner. No head of the table, no hierarchy. Everyone brought a dish. The little ones sat where they wanted. The men helped set the table. The women didn't wait to be asked to speak. Alina performed a poem she wrote herself. Miriam sang. Zara danced, and I sat in the middle. Not at the head, not off to the side. Just ... with them. Present whole. And I realized this was the family I had always hoped for. Not perfect, not healed beyond scars, but honest and free. So when people ask me, what family tradition ruined your family? I tell them it was the one we never questioned. The one that disguised fear as discipline, silence as virtue, control as love. But more importantly, tell them about the day we broke it. The day we stopped worshiping the chair and started listening to each other. The day we made a new tradition, one that made space for every voice, even the smallest, especially the smallest, because that's the only tradition worth keeping.